You know, it's actually been a while since I've done one of these, one of these videos about chords and chord progressions and stuff. And that's mostly because I didn't think I had shit to teach you. But I was working on this chord progression and I was having so much fun with it. I thought it'd be cool to share with you just the techniques that I use to spice this chord progression up. So that's exactly what we're gonna do in this video. Beautiful folks, what is up and how are you doing? This is your favorite struggling R&B producer, Valentine the Plug, live from the Danger Room. And in this video, I want to show y'all how I took this basic chord progression and turned it into something with a lot more depth, a lot more expression, and a lot more backbone. And I'm gonna break down the techniques that I use to do it. Alright, beautiful folks, welcome back into FL Studio. It's a beautiful day to break down this dope little chord progression. This chord progression is written in the key of A flat minor, and it is heavily relying on the third degree, which is always a minor chord in the which is always a major chord in the minor scale, and the second degree, which is actually supposed to be a diminished chord in the minor scale. But you can say that I'm modulating to the melodic mode for the second chord, which allows me to turn it into a full minor chord just like this. So it basically goes third degree, second degree, and that is the foundation of the chord progression. But we are looking to spice this up because as it sounds right now, it's all right, the foundation is there, but it's missing something. Just check it out for yourself. So let's break down what we've got for this chord progression. So it's basically just two chords, the third and the second. The major chord going to the minor chord with a half step difference. So it's kind of tension filled and that gives it a lot of expression. But it's kind of boring. There's nothing really happening. You're just waiting for these chords to alternate between each other. It's like this big, long, extended note, this big, long, extended stack of notes constantly just switching between each other. So we want to create a sense of excitement, but we want to go more in depth about the expression and the feeling of this chord progression. And an easy way to do that is, of course, you guessed it, by playing around with chord extensions. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So I've switched to another pattern. You can immediately see what it looks like when you decide to extend a major chord and a minor chord. You can actually see that I've extended them from a triad to a seventh chord. Now, constructing a seventh chord based on a major chord follows a set pattern. You can actually distinguish it right here. You can see 3 half steps until the second note, 2 half steps until the other note, and then you repeat it, 3 half steps until the second note, until the fourth note makes it a seventh. And if I go up 2 half steps, then I get a ninth. If I go up 3 half steps, I get an 11. Just like that. It's a simple pattern to follow. The same applies to a minor chord. 2 half steps gets you to the third, 3 half steps get you to the fifth, another set of 2 half steps get you to the seventh, and 3 half steps get you a minor ninth, just like that. So adding those seventh on top of what are already triads adds another layer of expression to your chord progression, which has it sounding just like this. So there's actually another technique that I like to use in tandem with my chord extensions, because when we think of chord extensions, we think of extending the chords. When you look at the piano roll, it's going up, right? From a 7th to a 9th, an 11, a 13, until you're back at the root again. It just goes up, right? But what if you took the root chords of the root notes of your chords and you would double them and play them an octave lower? You add another layer of depth to your chord progression, which now has it sounding a lot more evocative and just like this. So just to recap what we did, we extended our chords, our major chord up to a major 7 and our minor chord up to a minor 7, but we also took the root note of those two chords, we doubled them, pitched them down an octave, and now we have them playing in the bass. So that gets us a very nice expression-filled chord progression. But there's another technique, a little bit more complex, that you absolutely should be applying in order to get that sweet sounding chord progression. I've actually done an entire video on that, passing chords, but I'm just gonna break them down quick and clean for you in this video. So if you actually stuck around past the first 30 seconds, my retention rate sucks by the way, you would have caught me saying that it really feels like you're just waiting for that major chord and a minor chord to switch between each other, to alternate. And I decided to counteract that by adding passing chords, but I did a little sneaky thing actually. What I essentially just did is I took the major chord, I took the minor chord, I doubled them, and I pitched them down an octave, and I used them as passing chords. It's super sick, but it genuinely does work. I did try to switch it up a little bit by turning that minor 7 chord into a dominant 7 chord. But the essence of passing chords is essentially to have a passage between two chords. One is your chord that you're departing from, the other is your target chord, the chord that you're trying to reach. And it just makes that way a lot more sweeter. It really adds, a sense of something going on in between. You're not just waiting for the chords to resolve. It adds a layer of excitement. That's essentially why you should be using passing chords. And I did. So that's why with the addition of passing chords, hold up, before I continue, I actually add a lot more passing chords, because what I have here is a major 7 chord right here. What I have is a dominant 7 chord right here. I'm playing with a diminished 7, also a good form of a passing chord, and I'm playing with an augmented 7 chord right here, also an amazing form of a passing chord, and I'm playing with a dominant 7 with a flat 9 right here as a passing chord. But you can also actually see somewhere down the line, I think I snuck it in the finalized version, but I also am playing with a 7 sus4 with a 9 on top of it. So there's a lot of different passing chords that you can be using in order to spice up your chord progression without getting into the nitty-gritty of it, because I did a whole video about that. But you should be using them. You should be using them. And with that, this is what it now sounds like. Now, personally, I think that a lot of people can just call it a day at extending your chords, adding chords in the bass, and then playing around with passing chords. But for the people that really wanna, really wanna explore all of the possibilities, there's also the option of playing with the voicing of your chords. Now, chord voicings, chord extension is a part of chord voicings, but there's also the process of inverting your chords, altering your chords, and stuff like that. So let me just contrast these two patterns. You look at this pattern, you can actually see that this particular G sharp here is kicked down an entire octave so that it serves as the bass note of this little chord right here. Now, playing with your chords, inverting your chords, taking your 7th, taking your 5th, taking your 3rd, and putting them an octave higher or lower really adds another effect to your chords. It really can give your chord a significantly different feeling, and if that's what really contributes to your vibe, then by all means you should definitely do that. I've done that with this chord right here. I've done that with this chord right here. I often do that with diminished chord, because you can switch them around because they're essentially just stacks of intervals on top of each other. It really works. I think there's another chord that I inverted right here. I can't quite seem to find it, but the point of it is you invert your chords and you get a significantly different sound, which might just be the sound that really makes a difference in your beat. So with this little chord inverted right here, this is what we now have. Now, with there being so many layers as to how this chord progression has been dressed up, I essentially could get away with just what I've been doing. But when I write essentially a 16-bar chord progression, what I like to do is add a passage that is fundamentally different from the others. So that means that, for this little stretch right here, I actually didn't include as much passing chords as I would regularly do. And when you're conditioned to hearing passing chords in between those two chords that the chord progression is built on, it immediately, I feel that in this case, it adds a really cool dramatic effect. So let me just highlight this. Let me just play this so y'all can see what I'm getting at. I mean, if you're conditioned to thinking that this chord progression is just going to be looping over and over, which it technically is, then you may not expect this little part to come here. So this is where you're kind of building up to a climax, which makes this little ending stretch, which you're also not expected to hear, a lot more sweeter. So I think that I would file this under contrast, maybe. Throw your listener off. Make sure that they don't know what to expect. That's how you keep them intrigued. Now, the last thing that I want to break down with y'all is emphasis. So how do you make these chords stand out more than they already do? Well, that's where the strumming option comes in play. So everybody at this point knows that in FL, if you highlight your stack of notes and you hit Alt-S, it's Alt-S on a Mac for me, you can strum it, right? So what if I were not to strum everything? Because people are sometimes inclined to just strumming everything in the chord progression. I feel that strumming is a tool that you need to be able to use consciously and effectively. If you can use it consciously, then you'll be able to use it effectively. What I'm essentially trying to say is don't just strum everything in your chord progression. What you should be doing is your starting chord right here, and the chord you are resolving to, the chord you're landing on, those should be strummed. So I essentially only strummed this chord based on the third. Well, it's actually now a chord based on the first since it has a G sharp here. But these two chords are the only ones that I have strummed, and that makes them stand out. And that really tells the listener these are the foundations of the chord progression. Just listen to what I've got. So how do you tell your listener this is where it ends and this is where we're going to cycle back to the beginning? Well, I essentially did that using just chord theory. So let's start at the beginning. We now know that I am playing a chord based on the first degree. I am rocking with an A flat major ninth right here. So chord based on the first degree. And as you may know, everything resolves nicely to the first degree. The first degree is your bread and butter. Everything just goes with the first degree. It's the Guile theme of chords practically. It's the PB&J of chords practically. So what I did, I took this D sharp right here, and if we count, we know that this is the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. Yeah, so this is the fifth. 5 to 1. Oh, those are definitely the PB&J of chords. They always resolve to each other incredibly. So what I did, I gave y'all an ending stretch right here. I played y'all an F diminished 7 chord right here. I doubled the root note right here, and I added some tension by playing chords that contain notes that are just a half step lower. So it really adds a nice jazzy kind of little ending stretch. And once that hits the first chord again, you'll know that this is it has a certain je ne sais quoi, a certain je ne sais pas. I don't really know, but just listen to it. And beautiful folks, that's how I turn these vanilla chord progressions into the chord progressions that I rock with for my beats. Or better yet, that's how I create my ideas, my foundation, and that's how I expand them into dope concepts. Now, I hope that this video served as a dope reminder that you should probably be delving more into chord theory if you're interested in making R&B. It'll make your beats so much better than they already are. I also want to say that I am not the guy to ask any in-depth stuff about chord theory, but there's other amazing YouTubers. I definitely recommend Stefan Guy. His videos have taught me almost everything I know, but also picking up an instrument, just reading what you can and watching videos, doing a lot of self-study will get you it'll get you a lot of places. It's gonna take some time, but the grind is definitely worth it. I can definitely attest to that. Now, with all that out of the way, beautiful folks, I do hope that this video was informational. I hope it was entertaining to you. I hope it was both, but I'll settle for one. And I hope to see y'all in the next video. Now, y'all be easy. Peace.